The Ocean of Theosophy, Chapter 2, General Principles. The teachings of Theosophy deal for the present chiefly with our earth, although its purview extends to all the worlds, since no part of the manifested universe is outside the single body of laws which operate upon us. Our globe being one of the solar system is certainly connected with Venus, Jupiter, and other planets, but as the great human family has to remain with its material vehicle, the Earth, until all units of the race which are ready are perfected, the evolution of that family is of greater importance to the members of it. Some particulars respecting the other planets may be given later on, but first let us take a general view of the laws governing all. The universe evolves from the unknown, into which no man or mind, however high, can inquire, on 7 planes, or in 7 ways, or methods in all worlds, and the sevenfold differentiation causes all the worlds of the universe and the beings thereon to have a septenary constitution. As was taught of old, the little worlds and the great are copies of the whole, and the minutest insect, as well as the most highly developed being, are replicas in little or in great of the vast inclusive original. Hence sprang the saying, as above, so below, which the Hermetic philosophers used. The divisions of the sevenfold universe may be laid down roughly as the absolute, spirit, mind, matter, will, akasa or aether, and life. In the place of the absolute, we can use the word space, for space is that which ever is, in which all manifestation must take place. The term akasa, taken from the Sanskrit, is used in place of aether because the English language has not yet evolved a word to properly designate that tenuous state of matter, which is now sometimes called ether by modern scientists. As to the absolute, we can do no more than say, it is. None of the great teachers of the school ascribe qualities to the absolute, although all the qualities exist in it. Our knowledge begins with differentiation, and all manifested objects, beings, or powers are only differentiations of the great unknown. The most that can be said is that the absolute periodically differentiates itself, and periodically withdraws the differentiated into itself. The first differentiation, speaking metaphysically as to time, is spirit, with which appears matter and mind. Akasa is produced from matter and spirit. Will is the force of spirit in action, and life is a resultant of the action of akasa moved by spirit upon the matter. But the matter here spoken of is not that which is vulgarly known as such. It is the real matter, which is always invisible and has sometimes been called primordial matter. In the Brahmanical system, it is denominated Mula Prakriti. The ancient teachings always held, as is now admitted by science, that we see or perceive only the phenomenon, but not the essential nature, body, or being of matter. Mind is the intelligent part of the cosmos, and in the collection of 7 differentiations above roughly sketched, mind is that in which the plan of the cosmos is fixed or contained. This plan is brought over from a prior period of manifestation, which added to its ever-increasing perfectness, and no limit can be set to its evolutionary possibilities and perfectness, because there was never any beginning to the periodical manifestations of the Absolute. There never will be any end, but forever the going forth and withdrawing into the unknown will go on. Wherever a world or system of worlds is evolving, there the plan has been laid down in universal mind. The original force comes from spirit, the basis is matter, which is in fact invisible. Life sustains all the forms requiring life, and Akasa is the connecting link between matter on one side and spirit mind on the other. When a world or a system comes to the end of a certain great cycle or cycles, men record a cataclysmic in history or tradition. These traditions abound among the Jews in their flood, with the Babylonians in theirs, in the Egyptian papyri, in the Hindu cosmology, and none of them is merely confirmatory of the little Jewish tradition, but all pointing to early teaching and dim recollection also of the periodical destructions and renovations. The Hebraic story is but a poor fragment torn from the pavement of the Temple of Truth. Just as there are periodical minor cataclysms or partial destructions, so the doctrine holds there is the universal evolution and involution. Forever the great breath goes forth and returns again. It proceeds outwards, objects, worlds, and men appear. As it recedes, all disappear into the original source. This is the waking and the sleeping of the great being, the day and the night of Brahma, the prototype of our waking days and sleeping nights as men, of our disappearance from the scene at the end of one little human life, and our return again to take up the unfinished work in another life, in a new day. The real age of the world has been long involved in doubt for Western investigators, who up to the present have shown a singular unwillingness to take instruction from the records of Oriental people much older than the West. Yet, with the Orientals, is the truth about the matter. It is admitted that the Egyptian civilization flourished many centuries ago, and as there are no living Egyptian schools of ancient learning to offend modern pride, and perhaps because the Jews, quote, came out of Egypt, end quote, to fasten the Mosaic misunderstood tradition upon modern progress, the inscriptions cut in rocks and written on papyri obtain a little more credit today than the living thought of a record of the Hindus, for the latter are still among us, and it would never do to admit that a poor and conquered race possesses knowledge respecting the age of man and his world, which the Western flower of culture, war, and annexation knows nothing of. Ever since the ignorant monks and the theologians of Asia Minor and Europe succeeded in imposing the Mosaic account of Genesis of earth and man upon the coming Western evolution, the most learned, even our scientific men, have stood in fear of the years that elapsed since Adam, or have been warped in thought and perception whenever their eyes turned to any chronology different than that of a few tribes of the son of Jacob. Even the noble, aged, and silent pyramid of Giza, guarded by Sphinx and Memnon made of stone, has been degraded by Piazza Smith and others into a proof that the British inch must prevail, and that a, quote, continental Sunday, end quote, controverts the law of the Most High. Yet in the Mosaic account, where one would expect to find a reference to such proof as the pyramid, we can discover not a single hint of it, and only a record of the building by King Solomon of a temple of which there never was a trace. But the Theosophist knows why the Hebraic tradition came to be, thus an apparent drag on the mind of the West. He knows the connection between Jew and Egyptian, what is and is to be the resurrection of the old pyramid buildings of the Nile Valley, and where the plans of those ancient master masons have been hidden from the profane eyes until the cycle should roll around again for their beginning and their bringing forth. The Jews preserve merely a part of the learning of Egyptian hidden under the letter of the books of Moses, and it is still, to this day, in what they call the Kabbalistic or hidden meaning of the scriptures. But the Egyptian souls who helped in planning the Pyramid of Giza, who took part in the Egyptian government, theology, science, and civilization, departed from their old race. That race died out when the former Egyptians took up their work in the oncoming races of the West, especially in those which are now re-opaling the American continents. When Egypt and India were younger, there was a constant intercourse between them. They both, in the opinion of Theosophists, thought alike, but fate ruled that of the two, the Hindus only should preserve the old ideas among a living people. I will therefore take from the Brahmanical records of Hindustan their doctrine about the days, nights, years, and life of Brahma, who represents the universe and the worlds. The doctrine at once upsets the interpretation so long given to the Mosaic tradition, but fully accords with the evident account in Genesis of other and former, quote, creations, end quote, with the Kabbalistic construction of the Old Testament verse about the kings of Edom, who there represent former periods of evolution prior to that started with Adam, and also coincides with belief held by some of the early Christian fathers who told their brethren about wonderful previous worlds and creations. The day of Brahma is said to last 1,000 years, and his night is of equal length. In the Christian Bible, there's a verse saying that one day is as 1,000 years to the Lord, and 1,000 years as one day. This has generally been used to magnify the power of Jehovah, but it has been a suspicious resemblance to the older doctrine of the length of Brahma's day and night. It would be more of value if construed to be a statement of the periodical coming forth for great days and nights of equal length of the universe of manifested worlds. A day of mortals is reckoned by the sun and is but 12 hours in length. On Mercury, it would be different, and on Saturn or Uranus, still more so. But a day of Brahma is made up of what are called manvantaras, or periods between two men, 14 in number. These include 4,320,000,000 mortal or Earth years, which is one day of Brahma. When this day opens, cosmic evolution, so far as it relates to this solar system, begins and occupies between 1 and 2 billions of years in evolving the very ethereal first matter before the astral kingdoms of mineral, vegetable, animal, and men are possible. The second step takes some 300 millions of years, and then still more material processes go forward for the production of the tangible kingdoms of nature, including man. This covers over 1.5 billions of years, and the number of solar years included in the present, quote, human, end quote, period is over 18 millions of years. This is exactly what Herbert Spencer designates as the gradual coming forth of the known and heterogeneous form, the unknown and the homogeneous. For the ancient Egyptian and Hindu Theosophists never admitted a creation out of nothing, but ever strenuously insisted upon evolution by gradual stages of the heterogeneous and differentiated from the homogeneous and undifferentiated. No mind can comprehend the infinite and absolute unknown, which is, has no beginning, and shall have no end, which is both last and first. Because whether differentiated or withdrawn into itself, it ever is. This is the God spoken of in the Christian Bible as the one around whose pavilion there is darkness. This cosmic and human chronology of the Hindus is laughed at by Western Orientalists, yet they can furnish nothing better and are continually disagreeing with each other on the same subject. In Wilson's translation of Vishnu Purana, he calls it all fiction based on nothing and childish boasting. But the Freemasons, who remain inactive hereupon, ought to know better. They could find in the story of the building of Solomon's Temple from the heterogeneous materials brought from everywhere, and its erection without the noise of a tool being heard, the agreement with these ideas of their Egyptian and Hindu brothers. For Solomon's Temple means man whose frame is built up, finished and decorated without the least noise. But the materials had to be found, gathered together, and fashioned in other and distant places. These are in the periods above spoken of, very distant and very silent. Man could not have his bodily temple to live in until all the matter in and about his world had been found by the Master, who is the inner man. When found, the plans for working it required to be detailed. They then had to be carried out in different detail until all the parts should be perfectly ready and fit for the placing in the final structure. So in the vast stretch of time, which began after the first almost intangible matter had been gathered and needed, the material and vegetable kingdoms had sole possession here with the Master, man, who was hidden from sight within carrying forward the plans of the foundation of the human temple. All of this requires many, many ages, since we know that nature never leaps. And when the rough work was completed, when the human temple was erected, many more ages would be required for all the servants, the priests, the counselors, to learn their parts properly, so that man, the Master, might be able to use the temple for its best and its highest purpose. The ancient doctrine is far nobler than the Christian religious one, or that of the purely scientific school. The religious gives a theory which conflicts with reason and fact, while science can give for the facts, which it observes no reason, which is in any way noble or elevating. Theosophy alone, inclusive of all systems,